Really need to be so far away? Okay, so we are starting the last round for today on the Caribbean. Come on, everyone. Are we all here? Yes. Can I suggest that the colleagues from the Caribbean come closer? Because you're a bit far away. Would that be okay? Oh. Thank you. First volunteer forward. Jean-Marie. All right. So welcome. We're only 30 minutes late, which I think is a triumph. No, I don't think this is the Caribbean issue. It's we're having fun, so that's why. Okay, so thanks a lot for coming. We have a little session on the EU-LAC Digital Alliance and the Caribbean. I will introduce in a minute our moderator, Lenny Kellerhoff from the Digital Alliance Secretariat, GIZ, you know, the German institution. But what for us is important is that I think in the discussions these 2 days, is 1.5 days, we have noticed that, of course, everyone's aware, we haven't noticed it, we already knew that there are some issues that cannot be just basically translated just like this to the Caribbean states. It doesn't work. That there's a certain specificity to be had, also in terms of what everybody imagines, which is infrastructure and the resilience of infrastructure, but also in terms of the market, the business case for the Caribbean, which is always different, if not, I think, let's face it, is not a less attractive business case. And at the same time, I think Caribbean countries recognize the need for synergies, but also the need for a bit more integrated approach so that they can become precisely more attractive. So in many of these issues that we've discussed today, we've also discussed during a lunch a bit how Bella, the cable, can enhance the access of the Caribbean to much more interesting data, but of course bigger size and therefore bigger need for infrastructure. So all these things, we need to put them together. That would be, I think, my way of introduction for this part of the meeting. But I'll hand over the moderation to Leonie. I think, again, as we've said, maybe with a Caribbean angle this time, what is it the EU-LAC Digital Alliance can do. It's also, as I said at the beginning, what can the European Union help? Where can we be helpful in the Caribbean? But it's also is what kind of, what is the Caribbean angle to the EU-LAC Digital Alliance? What can we do together better? Leonie.
Thank you so much, Felix, for the introduction. As mentioned, my name is Leonie Kellerhof, and I'm the coordinator of the Secretariat of the Digital Alliance. I'm very honored to be here and to moderate this roundtable. I know it's quite late already, so I really want to say in terms of format of the session, this is really going to be an open exchange, and I'm really excited we're all really excited also from the side of the team of the Digital Alliance to hear, especially as Felix has mentioned, the perspectives of the Caribbean, of the perspectives that we've discussed today. Obviously, we have already heard all of your interventions today in the dialogue, so we're really looking to build on what's already been discussed yesterday and today. So we're very grateful for the number of countries and organizations from the Caribbean represented here today at this late hour, and I will start first, I think, by passing the word to Felipe de la Mota from the EU delegation in Barbados for a few comments.
Thank you, Leonie. No, I won't take long. I think the only idea here was to make sure that this session and what I wanted to pass, and I'm from the EU delegation in Barbados, which we have a regional focus on the Caribbean. So I think let's use this session pragmatically. Let's look at the consultations that have been done throughout the year, maybe not as much in the Caribbean. So now that you've heard the sessions and seen what the discussions are about, seen what the implementing partners are suggesting, I think it's important that the Caribbean speaks its voice and says at national, sub-regional level as well, what the needs are and how we can help, as Felix said. I think in this case, because of scale, synergies are not important, they're fundamental. So this is also something we absolutely need to consider, what the different levels at regional, sub-regional, and national level in the Caribbean can play and what role that can play. This is one of the first programs that we actually have the Latin American and Caribbean countries working together closely, and there's so many interactions here possible that we absolutely want to see them happen. But the dynamic within the Caribbean is important to have by itself. So without further ado, I think also to make the point that this is not the only program where we can help, of course, lead on these issues, but it's certainly the umbrella program where we want to coordinate them. So you don't have to, and this is something that we've been discussing throughout the Caribbean and with all the delegations and with your political representatives. It's not about understanding how our instruments work. It's about understanding what the needs of the region are and the countries are and how we can respond to them. So in this sense, we have these programs as well as other on digital financial inclusion, for example, or simply expertise programs where we're certainly trying to bring European expertise on regulatory aspects to the region, and we can certainly help with that. So without further ado, Leonie, maybe let's hear from countries.
Thank you so much. Exactly. So from what we've picked up on, and as we said, this is very open to any sort of other interventions as well, obviously, is that there are very specific contexts and issues faced in the Caribbean. We've also heard about the need for kind of sub-regional coordination and integration, and also a need of further regional coordination and integration with the rest of the region, Latin America and the Caribbean. So for me, or for us, the objective of the session is really kind of twofold. It's for us to understand where you see the key coordination mechanisms for sub-regional coordination on digital transformation between the Caribbean countries and the rest of the region, but also for you to be able to basically share with us the key issues, the key mechanisms that you would like to facilitate and to work with us on, so that also the team that you have heard moderate the policy dialogues today and also yesterday, starting with expertise funds as well, can share more about the technical offer that is also part of the policy dialogues pillar of the Digital Alliance. I would like to pass the word first to Jennifer Breton from CARICOM, who has kindly agreed to share a first opening intervention to provide a bit more context from the Caribbean side. Thank you very much, Jennifer, please.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Thank you, everyone. Again, as I think I shared this morning, I'd like to thank the conveners and the planners for the invitation to the countries of the Caribbean community and regional organizations. I think it's probably one of the first times that we have the secretariats of the OECS, CTU, and CARICOM in the meeting. And in particular for this focus session, as I reflected, this was one of the region's requests many years ago. So we thank you for pulling it off in this session, and I thank the persons who have stayed, even though we are between you and the cocktail. We promise to make this session as interesting as our carnivals and our cricket games so that you don't miss going to the cocktail a little late. Meetings such as these continue to be very important to the Caribbean community as we continue to forge a path that takes full advantage of the opportunities that ICTs make available for the region and its citizens. The growing uptake of ICT and the continual emergence of new developments are changing for us like everybody else the markets, and by extension our business models, our public sector models, and particularly as we are in the post-COVID era. As we all know, CARICOM countries continue to punch above their weight as developing small island developing states with regard to the struggles and opportunities related to digital development and science and technology. The discussions over these past 2 days have been enriching and instructive, and we are assured that we can learn a lot from our Latin American counterparts as they can learn from us. What is needed urgently are proactive, collaborative, tangible approaches to reshape the regional and national narrative around development, and particularly digital development. And we also need, as we've talked about in the last 2 days, behavioral and mindset changes at all levels and in all sectors. The region continues to pursue a digital single market underpinned by the successful development of the CARICOM single ICT space. We have walked through the pain of the GDPR and other processes from which we're still trying to recover and to be able to point to tangible results. The post-COVID months have not necessarily been kind to the countries of the region, save to heighten our awareness that there is much to be done and it is best done collectively. For example, the Readiness for Frontier Technologies Index 2022 show that our countries continue to face challenges in areas that matter, such as skills, research and development, industry development, finance, and ICT development. And in fact, in 2022, it shows that we are doing worse than we were doing in 2019. The areas we discussed yesterday and today are also areas of grave concern for the region. And as many of you are aware, the region was front and center in the EU-LAC project to link us to the GEONT and other research and development networks. As such, the BELLA project has much relevance to us as we seek to rework our entrance to leading and learning and benefiting from research and education networks across the world. As individual and collective countries, we have a good understanding of the what. Where we continue to struggle is with the how, as we heard yesterday. Part of the how is to have strong local and regional components. This includes fruitful relationships with public sector, private sector, and civil society, and the region continues to grapple with this as we go along. Over the past months since COVID, we have established, and I'll just mention a few things. I think Rodney mentioned the CARICOM Digital Skills Task Force, which is forging the way for us to have a regional digital skills strategy 2030. We have had a small initiative with CARICOM Girls in ICT Partnership trying to raise skills awareness and to foster inclusion. We've started the CARICOM ICT Gap Analysis Project, which will end next year, and the project is going to be extremely useful for CARICOM as it allows us to assess our digital maturity, the opportunities and challenges which still prevail, and will certainly underpin and bolster the region's stride to build back better. We started, as of this year, a CARICOM Cyber Resilience Project, which will produce a CARICOM Cyber Resilience Strategy for use by all the countries. We have continued to work on our financial inclusion policies, industrial policy, and sectoral policies from agriculture to youth. We are well structured with entities and agencies which support the CARICOM single market and economy, and there are about 26 such regional agencies with specific mandates. What is needed to engender to really vitalize them and bring them into the space is removing of silos and strategic inclusion and infusion of digital initiatives, plans and frameworks in these institutions to engender and help foster the CARICOM digital economy. I think we've shared some of the opportunities and our pain points over the past days, and country colleagues are here who will certainly add to this session by adding some specific needs for the countries and which can be raised at a regional level as time permits. A few of the pointers, though, which would continue to be helpful, a few pointers about some things which would continue to be helpful and which can be realized through this dialogue, and particularly the work on the Pillar 1, is one that we had mentioned before, we had raised before in this gathering, that it would be useful for the regional and sub-regional secretariats perhaps to have a dedicated session in this meeting where the participants can hear what's going on regionally and sub-regionally, and then be able to use the rest of the meeting for countries to really engage and meet around shared challenges and solutions. If we are going to meet our 2025 and 2030 targets, we think this is particularly important, so that we make a good use of the time while we're here together. We also have flagged the need for dedicated strategic hand-holding and technical hand-holding in spite of COVID, and technical support to help national and regional entities transform and evolve into their digital economy roles, and to be able to use these entities to support effective policy dialogue in the CARICOM region. And there's some elements at the granular level which my CARICOM colleagues will mention, but some of them are obviously around data and the need for us to set up either national or regional data authorities, and some around cybersecurity, obviously, and the need for certs, both certs with an E and certs with an I. Also, we need to have special, well-detailed information for resource mobilization, and that includes funds, but in particular at this time, we need a lot of technical expertise which will support the hand-holding, which will also extend knowledge transfer to CARICOM practitioners. We'd love, again, to be included on working groups as much as possible, or to really form our own working groups to support and give life to the EU-LAC process while we are not meeting in this way. We also need continually, although the discussion is not around funding, we need strategic guidance on the full cycle of what's available in the funding proposals, how to complete those in a timely manner, and with the implementation of the project as well. As we continue to think about implementing projects, we also need to be able to make our own space at the table for all the actors who want to help our region and to be able to work in a way that's beneficial to the region. We, again, need things which will help us quantify what's really needed to support our CARICOM digital economy. We are committed to developing a CARICOM toolbox, if that would be supported, one which could be completed by June 2024 to support all the areas which will be mentioned by my colleagues and which have been mentioned before, and I won't go into that list. And also we are committed to establishing an active resourced working group which will support the development of that toolbox and continue to help have seamless interaction with the EU-LAC process. And the persons attending here could certainly form the basis for that working group. One of our usual offers, as I close, is for us to host one or more of these dialogues and consultations in a CARICOM country, which will allow us to have more CARICOM persons to hear, learn, and participate in these rich discussions, perhaps in a different format. I'm not sure that the format as we've had for the last 2 days is conducive for CARICOM conversations, but certainly we think it would extend the demonstration of trust between our regions as we continue to work in this way, some in Latin America, some in CARICOM. In closing, Just like all SIDS, the countries of the region deserve, and I'm sure you agree, the opportunity to exploit and reap the benefits of digital technologies. Conversations about funding and resourcing have to remain on the table, as these are important to our digital, economic, and social and environmental infrastructure. The plan for us, the game plan I'm going to share with you, is to expand our trade and other economic bases with all our partners to the point where we are exporting innovation and goods, but not our talent. So we want to keep our talent to help us build our own digital economy. If the CARICOM region is digitally unstable, this leads to the instability of the whole world, as our interconnectedness is being forged more and more daily by digital technologies. And if we're going to be true to the slogan of cooperation that counts, I remind us all that we have to be intentional about all our actions and reinvigorate our interest in the plans and recommendations that emanate from this dialogue from both sides, both regions, the EU and Latin America and Caribbean. These must resonate with those of us in the room and our stakeholders, colleagues, teams at home, and help us to future-proof the lives of citizens of CARICOM in a positive way. I thank you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you for this intervention. I think those were some really helpful points to guide the dialogues that will follow. I would like to pass the word now briefly to Mr. Rodney Taylor from the Caribbean Telecommunications Union to also give us some introductory words.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon again, and yes, I can be brief because I think Jennifer's presentation was quite comprehensive. We spoke about market size, and this is definitely one of the challenges, and hence the emphasis on creating a single ICT space and regulatory harmonization. There's a high cost with respect to network infrastructure and connectivity for small island developing states like ours, given our unique circumstances. And hence, the more that we can harmonize our regulation and our policies, then the more attractive our markets become. One of the things we've been that has been brought to the forefront of the table with respect to our regional operators is the issue, for example, of the big tech companies and the OTTs, over-the-top services, and how they might contribute to development of the digital economy, whether through contributions to the networks infrastructure or through other initiatives that help to build out the economy. And we've been actually looking at what Europe has been doing. This is also an issue that has been discussed globally, but also we've had interventions by BEREC, the body of European regulators, on this issue to help guide us, because as small as we are to negotiate or discuss with big tech companies, then it becomes a lot more complicated or more difficult. I think certainly there's a need for institutional strengthening. So within the CARICOM, we have the Caribbean Telecommunications Union, we have CARICOM Impacts, we have the CARICOM Secretariat, all working on different initiatives. But I think there's a need for capacity building and for institutional strengthening to allow us to deliver more effectively on our mandate. So even the single ICT space, which was mandated by CARICOM heads in 2017, we're now actually doing the assessment. So it's clear that we're behind schedule with respect to that. Cybersecurity definitely is at the very, very high in terms of our cooperation, not just because there's a shortage of skills and the capacity to respond, but because if we are serious about digital cooperation, then, I mean, as the saying goes, the chain is as strong as its weakest link, and we don't want for the Caribbean to be seen as soft target and soft entry point to where they can impact our partners, our trading partners, such as Europe and others. So we need definitely to focus on capacity building in the area of cybersecurity and response mechanisms. We talk about regulation also. We talked about data and regulation. There are gaps with respect to the data protection legislation within the region. I think we all agree that the GDPR represents a good standard by which we can measure, even if we don't cut and paste the regulations, but we should. It sets a good model, and there are gaps in terms of the data protection legislation. But beyond that, the reinforcement, capacity to reinforce. So every week we see on the news some big company being fined by the by Europe for infringement of data protection and data privacy. But you really don't hear that very often in the Caribbean. And it's clear that data breaches are happening, without a doubt, it is no question. But therefore the ability to respond and to address these issues is very important, and therefore the capacity to reinforce the provisions of the legislation is something, even for governments that may breach these data regulations. So the independence, for example, of the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner and the Data Protection Office. One second. There's a clear need also to promote private-public sector partnerships. We have mentioned the initiative of one of our major players, Cable and Wireless, in JUMP. For me, that is something that is working. Clearly, they have a sense of corporate social responsibility, and if it is working, I think what we can do, and in general, if initiatives are showing promise or working, then we should work with them. We don't necessarily have to come with new ideas or new projects if we know that projects are working, and clearly the company has the capacity. And I'm happy to bring them to the table or to connect you with them. But it's an initiative with some very clear targets. They are owners of a network infrastructure. They have the capacity to deploy these networks with the relevant financial resources. I mentioned in my intervention earlier to the need for national strategies. So while we can speak, we know what needs to be done, for me, it is important for every member state to be guided by a national strategy. And in the absence of that, some reference to digital transformation within a national development strategy. So even if there isn't a sector-specific ICT strategy, a focus on, without a clear strategy at the national level, national development level, then in a sense we're not quite sure where we're going, and it's not very clear to determine progress that we're making. And lastly, I'll say on the issue of indicators or the monitoring evaluation, so our ability to be able to say if we're making progress. Very often on the international indicators, you'll find a lot of data from the Caribbean is missing, again, because the capacity to collect disaggregated data. How are we doing with respect to the inclusion of women, disadvantaged groups, underserved communities, persons with disabilities? So the ability to implement robust monitoring evaluation frameworks and ICT indicators would help us that when we come here, we're able to say definitively if we're making progress or not. So I will, I'll stop there for now and leave the rest for my colleagues from the Caribbean. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this intervention. As a final, very, very brief, please, opening statement, I would just like to pass the word to our colleague from Pillar 1, Alejandro Patiño from CEPAL, to talk very briefly about regional mechanisms and the coordination between the rest of the region and the Caribbean. Thank you, Alejandro.
Okay, Leonie, thank you very much. I'll try to be very, very briefly. Now, first of all, as EU-LAC, as complementer of the Digital Alliance Policy project, I would like to state once again our willingness and openness to work with Caribbean countries to achieve their objectives on digital matters, and provide all the expertise and capacities that the Commission has. This implies to develop substantive analytical studies, to give technical assistance to design and implement policies, and organize and generate the spaces for technical and policy dialogue and peer review exercises. To give some examples and to illustrate some of this work, I would like to focus now on one of the key topics that has been addressed already regarding the digital economy. For example, we have been able to develop activities to try to improve policies aimed to digitize better smaller companies. Within this work, we have produced various studies that have been published on the adoption of the digital technologies and SMEs policies in this area. We have also developed training courses to support government to develop policies on e-commerce. One of these courses has been organized specifically for the Caribbean. We have also managed to develop studies with new methodologies to better measure the digital economy based on combining web data information with official statistics. We also have developed an online platform with information about 3,000 websites about marketplaces to monitor e-commerce in the region for 33 countries. This information is of relevant not only to monitor the evolution of the digital economy, but also help to bring new regulation on the matter. We have also promoted the idea to foster a regional digital market in the region for several years now. This idea was based on the digital single market strategy from the European Union. Specifically, we have been working closely with other sub-regional organizations and integration blocks like the Pacific Alliance to help build their digital market strategies and make a diagnosis on ease the free flow of goods and services online. In the case of the Caribbean, I think this expertise will be very important, since, have you already mentioned, the Caribbean already launched a single ICT space strategy led by CTU and CARICOM. Just to finalize, once again at EU-LAC, we're completely helping to be able to combine our capacities with all the other partners at the Digital Alliance to drive the digital transformation of the Caribbean. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alejandro, also for being so brief and concise. We would like now to transition into really the thematic discussions, and I would like to structure this by topic. So following the structure of the 4 of the dialogues that we had today, starting with the topic of cybersecurity, and basically I would like to pass the word to our cybersecurity expert who also moderated the dialogue yesterday, Jean-Marie Chenou, to give a very, very brief opening comment about where you see the results of the outcomes, some of the observations that you've had from the dialogue on cybersecurity with regards to the Caribbean, and then we would really like to hear your interventions on the priorities and the mechanisms that you think should be facilitated further in cooperation with the European Union. Thank you, Jean-Marie.
Thank you, Leonie, and thank you everyone to keeping it with us that late in the afternoon. I'll be very brief. The challenge that we face right now is how do we respond to the demand or the necessities of such a diverse and vast region from our own perspective. So we work at a multi-level kind of perspective. We have the bi-regional level with the European Union, CELAC, like the summit that happened in July in Brussels, and the next one in 2025. We have the EU-LAC that Alejandro just presented, and there is within EU-LAC the EU-LAC process, and that's something that we are supporting, especially the work of some working groups. So for example, in cybersecurity, there is a working group on cybercrime and cybersecurity, including countries from the whole region. And then we have kind of a sub-regional level. We were last month in Central America, and now we have kind of a chance to hear some comments and feedback from the Caribbean specifically. Basically what we've discussed yesterday and what we came out as priorities in the inception phase of the project is, as it was also mentioned by CARICOM and CTU, the need for cybersecurity regulations and governance mechanisms. That's something that should be strengthened and should not be strengthened only in terms of having more documents, but really how to make them implemented at the national level. Another one is the lack of spaces of dialogue, such as this one, but the bi-regional spaces of dialogue dedicated to cybersecurity. So there is also a need to strengthen cyber diplomacy and kind of the emergence or the strengthening of cyber diplomacy communities within the region with the participation of actors from the European Union. So I won't be long on capacity building, but we do have the LAC 4 Center that was presented yesterday, and we work hand in hand with the LAC 4 in terms of capacity building, but it's also from the capacity building that we can build also policy dialogue. So basically that some of the priority we discussed yesterday and during the first few months of the project, and I would like to hear some feedback, maybe specific priorities for the Caribbean region that what we should take into account going forward with the cybersecurity policy dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean-Marie. And yeah, we're happy, as Jean-Marie said, happy to open now the first round of interventions. So please just raise your hand or feel free to also just directly come in. Specifically on, as Jean-Marie mentioned, the priorities on cybersecurity and the regional mechanisms on cybersecurity where you would like to comment your priorities. All right, I see St. Lucia, please.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. The last 2 days have been very eye-opening for me, but one thing that really stood out was the lack of policy that addresses cybersecurity, data governance, etc. During the sessions, I actually searched through my own country's policies, and I found that they were severely lacking. Even the more up-to-date ones were missing. And the policy is hindered by the fact that we are very siloed within our own governments. So different departments, they don't communicate with each other. Interoperability is a problem. So because of that, everybody basically does their own thing. So even though we had policy that would help strengthen our resilience to cyber attacks, cybercrime, etc., then having it filter down to the different departments so they could actually work on something would be a problem. But there needs to be a more sharp, a more direct policy, because the cybersecurity needs to be buried in some sort of ICT policy, but there's nothing direct. It's given lip service. It's too general. It's something that is filler. So that is one of the biggest things, and I'm taking copious notes because I want to go back home and we need to have a really serious discussion about creating proper policy so that we could actually think about how we're going to use that policy and to guide us moving forward. Another thing that was brought up here is that the idea of sustainability and continuation of projects. We do get projects for a lot of things like this. For example, we might get a project to help train, etc. But after the project is finished, the sustainability of the continuation is not there. So we have a lot of projects that kind of stop. So after the funding is done, after things have gone, the training, it stops there. There's no continuation, no sustainability to make the project continue. And that is something that has to be addressed, but we go back to policy. So we have a policy problem in terms of we don't have it, it's not given as much attention. So it makes us far more vulnerable to cybersecurity issues and to data governance issues, etc. And that is a very scary thing to me as a technology person, because we are just one data breach away from a massive emergency that we probably will not be able to recover from. Our data, etc., storage, these are things that we need to rethink. And I'm really happy to see that almost everyone here has a similar problem, maybe not as bad, maybe not as terrible, but everybody has similar problems. And that's why the collaboration, these spaces are important, because it's only when I got here I realized, yeah, we have a lot of work to do. So these are two other things that, as a region, I think that we really need to pull our resources together. Having a regional CERT team, well, a CERT, so where we can deal with cybersecurity issues regionally, is something that I think is really, really important, should be set up. Because we need to be able to deal with these issues very quickly, because it's a hidden secret and it's a dirty little secret that we do get data breaches. But nobody wants to talk about that. We just kind of, we'll recover from it. But these things are extremely important, because the average person doesn't know that this is happening. Their data resides somewhere, and at any moment, we could have a rogue actor or state rogue actor just come in, ransomware our data, steal it, damage it, and then we will be set back 20 years. Or set back to the point we can recover. And that is something that we need to address seriously, and it has to be addressed by people way above me. So that is why we need to have this constant dialogue to let people know that we have to put the policy in place, we have to put the procedures in place, we have to train the people, and we have to start collaborating with our sister nations, with our regions. We share a common ideals, and that is something that unites us, and together we are stronger. So that's one of the things that I really want to say, and I would really like to thank you for giving me this opportunity, because it's really opened up my eyes. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this intervention, and I would like to comment as well that if you do go home with your notes and to revise, to please also involve Jean-Marie in this conversation, because that's the way that we are structured with our focal points, and the way that we want to design the session is also really for you to be able to follow up and to reach out to the team afterwards. So that would be really excellent. So please do follow up also with us. I see some cards raised back there, but I can't see who it is because it's turned away from me. St. Vincent, please. Thank you.
And then someone, and then Belize here.
Good afternoon. So I just wanted to let us know that, as you've heard yesterday about the CAR-TP, St. Vincent is currently undergoing the digital transformation under the Caribbean Digital Transformation Project. We are in the early stages currently, and we want to set up CCERT in the region, and we are also making recommendations to have a national CERT. But as you heard yesterday from Dominica, under the project, we are unable to, at the moment, find experts to deal with the cybersecurity legislations. And so we are looking to you, hopefully, for some guidance in that area so that we can find those needed experts and so that we can get this area on the road. All right? I think I covered it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Passing the word to Trinidad and Tobago, please.
Thank you. I think for us, and I think I'm speaking for the Caribbean, if we have decided that digital technology is going to be the enabler of development, then cybersecurity has to be the first thing we look at. If we are not secure, whatever we're doing in terms of achieving development is going to be compromised. So I think, when we talk about security by design, those things just have to happen. And from the policy level, we have to start incorporating those principles of security by design into our policy development. Secondly, one of the issues that we considered as well in terms of CARICOM and also then working with our partners within LATAM is maybe establishing an ecosystem almost of CCERTs. If we have a mechanism by which our CCERTs work collaboratively within the sub-region of CARICOM or the Caribbean, but also have access to the information and data, even the incidents that our Latin American colleagues are experiencing, that really makes for a huge difference. If there's an incident, say, in Guatemala, and that's then it's able to be channeled all the way to our Caribbean islands, we may be able to do something that prevents us from having the same incident. So can we consider some sort of ecosystem in which our CCERTs speak to each other and collaborate on an ongoing basis? It doesn't have to be a very formal, but some way in which those technical people can speak to each other all the time. Someone mentioned, and thirdly, I think yesterday someone mentioned something that resonated with me, and maybe it's because I used to be a diplomat, but they talked about a foreign policy perspective for cybersecurity. And I thought that was very, very important because globally, everyone's been impacted. So how can we even come up with processes at that global level and have ourselves as CARICOM states, as LATAM countries, because while this is a CARICOM dialogue, I'm not losing sight of the fact that the Digital Alliance is EU and LAC. So how can we have some sort of foreign policy perspective to deal with cybersecurity? Thank you.
Thank you so much for these really important points. In the sense of time, I will continue now with Belize. With a very brief comment, please.
There we go. I think my colleagues have summarized very excellently, as well as the head panel, in what are the areas of focus. I just wanted to add a quick intervention, specifically as it relates to leveraging some of the investments have previously been made in regards to LAC 4, recognizing that this training institution is physically located in the Dominican Republic, and now looking at the national perspective, Belize being located all the way in Central America, and the distance with the training center, I think I go back to my point of yesterday in how can we build on the efforts of LAC 4 to now integrate with our national and sub-regional educational institutions, because training opportunities, of course, are necessary. But it does require consistent capital investment, and maybe if there's a connection between LAC 4 and our regional institutions, it can support those of us in other regions, in other countries that not have the financial space to consistently engage with cross-border trainings. So I just wanted to make that point again of the need to maybe have that level of conversation with our educational systems.
Thank you very much. I realized I really probably need to get an eye test because I cannot read your sign in the back there, but please do go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, colleagues. Thank you for the opportunity to be at the table and to speak on behalf of a component of civil society from the University of the West Indies. So I represent academia, but also the Caribbean Open Institute, which is a regional civil society organization that focuses on capacity building, research, and also contributing where we can to the policy agenda. I just wanted to make a very brief contribution on the cybersecurity issue. As I mentioned, one of the big areas for us is capacity building, and I know there has been quite a bit of discussion on the kind of technical skills that we have to build in the region to be able to deal with the cybersecurity threats. I think one of the things that we tend to ignore is the broad-based component of digital literacy that we have to address for all of our citizens. And one of the areas, and my colleague Rodney mentioned earlier, the JUMP program that we're doing with Cable and Wireless. So we actually contribute the digital literacy component to that JUMP program. And that digital literacy program is designed around, you would be familiar with the European DigComp competency framework. And a big part of that is awareness and safety online. And I think one of the things that we have to do to combat the challenges of cybersecurity, to combat misinformation and disinformation, is just broad-based training of our citizens in understanding safety online, how to use the internet, and just being able to guard against the kind of threats that are there online. So I think as we speak about cybersecurity and the technical infrastructure and the skilled infrastructure, we also have to ensure that we address the broad-based competencies and literacy of our citizens to be able to function safely and securely online. So I just wanted to make that small contribution, and you'll probably hear me making a lot of contributions around capacity building, because we think that is probably one of the areas that we have to invest the most in within the Caribbean if we're going to make the kinds of strides that we need to take advantage of the digital opportunities that are available. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And we will have to move on to the next topic quite shortly, so I would like the last 4 interventions to be the Bahamas, OECS, CTU, and Colombia, in that order, before we move on to the topic of data governance. Thank you.
Thank you, and I shall be brief. Over the past 2 days, I've heard so much about policy and strategy as it relates to cybersecurity. So I contacted a colleague of mine at home to find out who should be responsible for building our policy and strategy. Should it be the CERT, or should it be some IT department? And even still, we're still unclear as to which direction we should go and who should be responsible for building those policies. But suffice it to say, it's a muddy area. Secondly, if I haven't heard it once, I haven't heard it 100 times in the past few days, is capacity building. And it's something that certainly needs to be addressed. I heard you speak about a working cybercrime working group in the EU-LAC. If you could give me some more information later, I'd appreciate that. Additionally, we spoke about cybersecurity not receiving the attention it deserved. Maybe we should make cybersecurity a political issue rather than a IT issue. If we can get governments to see that, if we can get citizens to see that the governments are protective of their data, perhaps citizens will begin to trust governments more, and they can use that perhaps as a political point. Finally, I have been reading the United States cybersecurity strategy, and one of the pillars of their cybersecurity strategy is that the responsibility of security perhaps should be shifted less from users who may just click on an email link and bring the entire network down, and shift that responsibility to the professionals, meaning have them build security within all of their processes and all of their equipment and all of the devices, and just attack cybersecurity, the issue from that angle. And perhaps that's something we should consider. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Passing to the OECS, please.
Promise to be brief, because I guess what I wanted to say has been said. I wanted to focus on the role of education in building digital resilience, because we talk about cybersecurity as a very objective and abstract concept. We need to build within our people the capacity to make the right decisions. Okay, and so we have made some strides towards that. We have continuously mentioned the digital transformation project, but other things have happened in relation to that. There's the adoption of digital competency frameworks that stress the specific skills required to develop that type of digital resilience. I want to also just add quickly that we need to start addressing this issue from as early as the primary school level, and stop treating digital education, ICT education, and those things as luxuries or sides that students can engage in, if nothing else is available. Thanks.
Thank you very much. CTU and then Colombia, please.
Thank you. Just very quickly, I just wanted to mention the issue of critical infrastructure, and if we were to prioritize, I think that is important to specifically call out critical infrastructure that has the capacity to cause loss of life. For example, there have been threats against our healthcare institutions within recent times, to the point that it impacted delivery of services. And there are very few Caribbean countries that have actually gone through the process of identifying that critical infrastructure at the national level, and it's important at least to be able to identify it and then have specific targets on protecting that infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and please, if we can have a very brief final intervention from Colombia, who have raised their hand, and then we will transition to data governance. And while we move the microphone, I would just like to comment that sorry, Lina, just 1 second. If our next speaker will hold her opening or kind of her few opening sentences in Spanish, so if you require translation,
no, that's fine.
Please, not you, but everyone. Please
sure.
Just raise your hands quickly so we can pass you a translation device. Go ahead, Colombia, please.
So, well, the first thing to say to the Caribbean is that we feel empathy for you. We have also San Andres, Providencia, Santa Catalina, and other islands. And as Felix was saying yesterday, we all agree in two things, I think. We need to build resilience for climate change and for food security. We already had COVID, and we need to build that information interoperable that we had that made us survive as a world. And the next thing we will be facing is how our countries are going to be affected by climate change and for food security. At the Organization of American States, there are several of the countries of the Caribbean, and we voted already for 2 decisions. One of them, the decision from COMCITEL 432, that was Colombia and all these 13 countries advocating for the full region, and to build this infrastructure and this interoperability, starting with agriculture and climate, because also we feel that those topics, there is no AVEAS data, there are no problems for us to move ahead. And that is the empathy we feel and the thing we want to advocate here with you to share that project and to build that project together. We already have a conversation with Eugene, that's the president of the Development Bank of the Caribbean, and he feels the same, like there is a priority to break those silos that are not only, as you can tell, in Latin America, Europe, but also in the Caribbean, and I think interoperability is that wonderful opportunity that we can build together. So the 2 things we were sharing yesterday, and we keep sharing and advocating, is to develop one fund that is to build together. Colombia is willing to share that fund to build that ecosystem for entrepreneurs, because money also help us to align and then to give a purpose. From governments, we cannot design innovation, we cannot design solutions. We can barely take our few resources and a few time to design that we are going to agree, that is the main innovation, to collaborate and to have focus. And the second is to develop a back office of experts to build this interoperability. The next, those entrepreneurs, brilliant people in the Caribbean, brilliant people in Latin America, brilliant people in Europe and in Africa, we don't have an agenda on artificial intelligence, and I feel that artificial intelligence is that glue that will help us to move all these silos and to connect them. So those are the 2 things that I wanted to add to the table, that you count with Colombia, and feel free to reach out if we can make an agreement to keep working together, because it's just one effort, but the effort is going to be worthy for different countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lina, for this intervention. We will pass now to the topic of data governance, which the dialogue was moderated by our expert Maria Rosario Heras Carrasco, who is here now to also give a very, very brief introduction. Por favor, Charo, 1 minuto, 2 minutos about her perception of the dialogue on data governance and the topics that she has observed for the Caribbean. As I mentioned before, she will intervene in Spanish, so if you require a translation device, please just raise your hand, and we will pass it to you from the back. And then you obviously are free to intervene in English, and Charo has her device. So, adelante, Charo.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. I'm going to try to be brief so that you can understand, and I'll be waiting for your comment or interventions. I think it's been clear now the importance that is given in the Caribbean region to data protection. This morning, it was mentioned that different levels of understanding from every country. The countries said that they were in different pages, and Felix has said that nobody is coming in late. In the EU, we have a tradition. The first data protection legislation comes from 1995, and we have updated it in 2016. So this is an opportunity that the EU can offer with lessons learned and what we have done right, but also there are things or there are issues where we have made mistakes. So it is a pleasure also to see how in the region, when you talk about data protection, you take the European framework as a benchmark. This European framework, regulatory framework, is being the benchmark in LATAM and in the Caribbean, but also in the world. And in relation to the issues that have been mentioned today, one important issue is to develop regulatory standards taking the framework as a reference, but the standards must be adapted to the Caribbean region. And another note that I made is the need of training, education, maybe emphasizing on public officials. And also, we spoke about the importance of transnational data transfer and how important they are in this globalized world. And also, reference has been made on the hand-holding and the support to create control entities. These are all issues where the European Union has vast experience, and we are willing and open to learn more about your intervention.
Thank you, Charo. I'm sure some of the, let's say, general mechanisms that we've commented on cybersecurity might also apply to this topic, as we've noted also a lot of similarities in the dialogues before. But yes, same again now. Please, if you just raise your hand or raise your card, we're happy to hear interventions or your thoughts, your further thoughts on what's already been mentioned in the dialogues on the topic of data governance, and where you see the potential for a way forward also together with the European Union. Yes, please, OECS.
Thank you so much. I want to talk about the issue of interoperability and how that relates to data governance and data sovereignty. So with the digital transformation projects that we have on stream, we are likely to open the floodgates, really, open the floodgates in the sense that we are now storing the data of thousands of OECS citizens, and we're not just talking about just demographic data. Interoperability suggests that we're connecting data in health, education, we're developing a skills database. We're looking at movement, migration, all of those critical issues. So if you consider the extent of that data that we will be collecting and of course using, it does give a strong sense of the type of possible exposure that our citizens may have to cyber threats. But the EU was able to do something quite fantastic in their own attempt, to support interoperability and connection with data governance and cybersecurity. So I think one of the lessons we can learn here is from the experiences of the EU, the different initiatives that you put in place, and what are the lessons to be learned, and at the same time, what were the successes that can be contextualized to our small island developing states. So for us, that is quite critical. Another very critical issue is, and I brought it up yesterday, is that business of data sovereignty. We understand that a lot of our data are stored in data centers that are outside of the region. Yesterday I mentioned, our satisfaction with the fact that a data center was being constructed by Google in Uruguay, that some exists in Chile, etc. And I learned this morning that Jamaica was able to build, their own data center. We're looking for support for those type of initiatives. You can't do it in every single island, but when we talk about economies of scale, how can those type of ventures be replicated in this OECS? So at the minimal, we can mirror our data and have some type of ownership of it. So for us, these are some extremely critical issues, because especially when we look at this business of digital transformation, the truth is we are opening up our citizens to a lot of potential threats. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this intervention, and especially the comment also on the economies of scale, which I think is very relevant for all of the topics that we're discussing today. Belize, please. Thank you.
Only took 2 times. I want to make an intervention that kind of takes us beyond the conversation of data governance and a bit more in the conversation also of artificial intelligence. I think we've discussed extensively over the last two days the gap that exists in regards to data governance within the Caribbean region, and specifically even the notion of not just legislations but strategy. Coming from the point of view where in the case of Belize, we've partnered with the IDB to utilize a digital maturity, a tool that actually is now supporting the development of our national data strategy. But recognizing the leadership of the EU in artificial intelligence, I think there's an opportunity here where the EU can support us at a technical assistance level to ensure that our national data strategies also consider the input for the utilization of artificial intelligence. To be honest, I'm still not convinced at the level of needing a separate artificial intelligence strategy, but maybe rather, how can we empower national strategies, national data strategies that have elements of artificial intelligence in the utilization of artificial intelligence, whether it be ethical principles, etc., different regulations. So I would like to make a proposition that we begin to integrate these, while separate concepts, very dependent concepts, into now providing that level of support to the region, so that when we're talking about data governance, we're also beginning to have a discussion on how can artificial intelligence be part of the conversation. And it's not a situation where we take a focus only on data strategies, and then we now have to go another step of developing another strategy. So I would say I think that is where the capacity, the learning from the EU can begin to inform us, so that we can have more integrated approaches to data governance overall.
Thank you so much also for this very important point on, well, cross-topic and work and convergence in strategies. I think that's very relevant. I see, yes, Trinidad and Tobago, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Following up on my colleague from Belize, I think something that struck me in terms of, if we're looking at artificial intelligence and so forth, and based on a conversation we had during the lunch hour in terms of the Bella 2 cable and some of the opportunities it could afford, I think we have to look at research and development. For the Caribbean in particular, that's not an area in which we have particular strengths. We have very smart people, but the research and development element, I think it's an area that we really need to focus on. And I would like perhaps my colleague from the UWI to, I'm not putting you on the spot, but you probably know better than I do, but it is an area that, in terms of when we look at what we are doing, that research and development element is not as strong as it should be. And of course, the EU has quite a leadership role in that area, so that I think is an area that we can depend on you for. I know everyone talks about holding hands. I don't want you to hold my hand for very long. I want to build agility, and I want to run. I don't want someone to be and I'm speaking for Trinidad and Tobago here. We don't want our hands to be held for a very long time. We want to build the capacity, build agile systems, and then we do it ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this intervention. I'll pass to Antigua and Barbuda.
Thank you.
I wanted to follow on a bit on what Trinidad would have stated about the need for research. But because as I listened to the past couple of days, I just realized that even though we've spoken about AI, and I know a lot of our countries are still very much paper-driven, so we have to go through a process of digitizing, storing it, analyzing that data, with or without AI, and then to be able to use that for decision-making. And that concept of where we get from paper to storage, and that way come the whole topic of data sovereignty. Where do we put that data? How do we organize it? How do we make it open so that you can use it in the various platforms for analysis? And then once you've gotten to that state, how do you work it to the point when you can make sensible decisions that will guide your decision making in government for the betterment of our people? And that is where I think another area that we can look at as a possible area of expertise or interaction that will help us to go from that paper state to the point when you can use the data intelligently to make decisions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I see one final intervention at the back, and then I think we can move on to the next topic unless there's any other short interventions on the topic of data governance. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a very brief intervention to concur with my colleague from Trinidad and Tobago. I think a lot of times the data governance narrative puts a lot of emphasis, rightly so, on the protective measures. Data protection legislation, data privacy, and so forth. But then, as a result, we lose sight of what I like to call the positive side of data governance. How do we build capacity to exploit the value opportunity that data represents? And so just to concur with the earlier point that we have to, while we build these protective mechanisms and these privacy mechanisms, put a lot more emphasis on building data skills across the board, public sector, private sector, or primary education and secondary education has to be building data skills from the ground up. And I think it's an area that too often we don't pay enough attention to. And so I just want to make sure that we're not only defensive about data governance, but we also look at the proactive side of data governance. As I say in football, good defense wins championships, right? But you need good offense as well. So building data skills is incredibly important and always has to be a part of the narrative.
Thank you very much. Then we will move on to the topic of e-governance. Carlos, if you could please come up. So e-governance was a dialogue led, as you know, by the Estonian e-Governance Academy, who facilitated this exchange earlier today. And, well, I would like to ask our expert here, Carlos Vargas, to briefly share some comments, as the other experts have done, and then we'll open the discussion on the topic of e-governance. Thank you.
Well, first of all, thank you, everyone, for being here, still being here. I know we're all tired, and the list that you want to see is just a person talking boring things. So I will try to make it fun. I will try to make it very concise, and something that perhaps, hopefully, it will be of interest of everyone. So from EGA side, from e-Governance Academy, that is coming from Estonia, we have heard a lot of the comments from the previous session, from our session during the morning, and now we have liked a lot of your comments, and we have very specific things that we have been discussing, well, now with my colleagues. So we would like to propose to you that from EGA side we can cooperate. We have certain ideas of what we can cooperate, and mostly is in some frame of interoperability for the region that will help the countries to establish sorry for repeating, but a framework that allows the country to start the model of interoperability, putting the standards and not paying attention to the technology itself, to any solution in specific, but to set up the rules that it will allow to pass through physical to a digital level. We have discussed also that in Central America, there is something very interesting with Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, and we believe that perhaps it could be something of interest for the Caribbean. I have heard a lot about the necessity of capacity building. We could also provide that. So in terms of digital identity, interoperability, citizen engagement, or the other topic, sorry, I'm also very tired, so my brain is stopping to function correctly. But we would like to also offer or put on the table the capacity building training. As Trinidad and Tobago mentioned, it's not about creating a codependency in capacity building, or that we arrive, we give something, and just because we leave, then the project stops. The aim is to create a concise knowledge that will allow you to continue reproducing the project, or at least reproduce the knowledge that has been created in this cooperation, so that you will continue by yourself, and maybe later on, if you invite us and there's some space for further cooperation, for further assistance, we'll be pleased to do it. But the aim is to create a very precise, concise knowledge on the area for you to follow up and get ahead of all these topics that are already taking very big steps in the world. There's also something in citizen engagement that we have been talking with some of the country, or especially in Rapa Nui. Rapa Nui is a small island in the Pacific, but still belongs to Latin America because it's part of Chile. And some of the discussion is that this is a very vulnerable society in terms of digital engagement, and we would like to also propose that for the Caribbean, that there are some sessions on capacity building, on talkings, on testing methodologies of participation and engagement with citizens in collaboration with the government and civil society and academia, in order to create this environment of cooperation and start creating dialogues in terms of the digital development. So that will be it from me. I hope that my brain is still working a little bit, so I was clear on my ideas. If not, please just tell me, ask me, and also please also approach my colleagues from e-Governance Academy, Marit and Cristina, during the cocktail session, and we'll be pleased to continue the conversation.
Thank you very much, Carlos.
Definitely stopped the cocktail session.
Well, he's still going on.
They're going to bring cocktails inside, or are we going to?
Well, the outside cocktail session.
Okay, before we go into the roundtable on cocktails, maybe we'll pass the word quickly to Belize to intervene on the topic of e-governance, since we do have one more topic also to go through afterwards, so please take it away.
I'll be quick, because I know we all want to get to the cocktails. I think just 2 points as well to add to the summary of Carlos. One, we've discussed it in other thematic areas, but when we talk about digital governance, it's also very important, and that's the accessibility to toolkits, toolboxes that really helped us to address various thematic areas, whether it be in cybersecurity, data governance, the compliance with GDPR, the compliance with interoperability frameworks, etc. Because I completely agree with my colleague from Trinidad and Tobago. How can we take a learning process, but at the same time ensure that we have been able to build a level of resiliency and minimize codependency? We love the support, but we also want to be able to stand on our 2 feet. So I think having the availability of those toolkits, toolboxes, even having maturity model tools or surveys available to us that really speaks to the context of the Caribbean will also allow us to repeatedly be able to conduct certain maturity assessments that allows us to better plan, whether it be for CARICOM ICT space strategies or whether it be for digital skills training strategies. But at the end of the day, those toolkits would have been modernized to fit the context of the Caribbean, and that I think would be excellent to proceed with. And then the second point, Clearly, I'm thinking of the cocktails because I've forgotten what's the second point.
See, I'm not alone here.
You were speaking, let me see if I can remember.
We can also come back to you if you would prefer.
We can come back to you.
Sorry.
No problem. We'll come back to you. St. Vincent, please. Sorry, we can't hear you.
Okay. Throughout the day, you would have heard us talking about how we are involved in a number of initiatives for digital transformation. But I think one of the concerns I have, and I don't think we have even, if we even mentioned it, maybe I missed it, but we would not have spoken about it in depth for sure. And it's the aspect of one of our most vulnerable sectors, which is the differently abled persons. I am so concerned that in our process or in our quest for digital transformation, which is very good, while we are doing that, putting our services online, helping our governments to be more efficient, helping our processes to be more efficient, we are still leaving this part of our people, our sector behind. When we put all these services online and we do not have anything that right now they're already challenged, but yet when we get all these online and we do not bring them up, we do not build their capacity, we do not develop systems that would help them to participate in this transformation process, they're going to get further behind. And then that gap that we are trying to close, instead of closing it, it's been widened. I really think this alliance should look at something where we could actually involve or find some ways to get these persons not just to use the services, but to play a more participative role in all of this transformation process. So I think this is something that we should look at.
Thank you so much. That's a very important comment, and I think we can return to Belize now for the second point that was missed before.
Yes, I remember now. In the same line of toolkit, I think there is an opportunity as well that exists with the ability to use existing code. So having a conversation upon open software and how can the Caribbean begin to access certain platforms that might be today deployed in the EU, but even beyond that in other regions of the alliance. I spoke to it earlier where there is already initiatives executed at Uruguay, at Argentina, Paraguay, etc., whether it be in citizen participation, whether it be in digital solutions, whether it be payment facilities. These are all solutions that we, regardless of our context, require as part of our building blocks of a digital government. So in an effort to, one, accelerate the maturity within the region, but two, to also reduce the cost to the region, and three, to allow us to ensure harmony, I think there is a need to discuss how can we maybe consider some of the programs that exist, like digital public goods initiatives that can now be utilized and have the Caribbean be more active within these current activities that allow us to access open source solutions that are applicable to our context, of course.
One important thing there, and I would like to go back, is that we need to set the rules, we need to set the standards. In order, if Elisa wants to choose any open source, well, at least you will have the correct rules and what you want and what you expect, so in order to put the open source to function as you want, not that you worked for the open source. So yeah, definitely, that's what we're here, so we can do it.
Thank you so much. I will pass it to the OECS for the final intervention on e-governance. Then we just have connectivity to briefly go through, and then we can move on to the cocktail.
Oh, I thought I was closing so we could go to the cocktail, but sorry guys. Before I took on this role at the OECS, I was an educator, 32 years. And for 20 years, I was a teacher trainer focusing on technology integration. And I couldn't help but align this business of e-governance with models of tech integration that just make sense. Within the OECS, we have, in as much as we're very related, and I guess that's the case for the entire Caribbean, we have different contexts that require different approaches. So one of the models that I used to really tout when I taught this program was the SAM-R model of technology integration. We started with the business of substitution and moved all the way to redefinition, which is the ultimate goal. But the beauty of this model is that it allowed persons to enter this ecosystem at different levels, at different points. What we're seeing right now is the idea that we have this, we look at e-governance as this one structure that everybody, regardless of where you're starting from, must engage in, must be a part of. And I'm suggesting that we look at models that will facilitate entry at different points. So we can look at entry at a substitution stage, where what we're doing is digitizing, and that's okay. That's a starting point. But as we move up that ladder to an augmentation stage, where we begin to add some functionality of the technology, and we can move all the way to modification, and then finally redefinition, where issues of AI comes in, and how AI plays a critical role in our processes, interoperability, and all of those things. I am just suggesting that maybe there's an opportunity to rethink our approaches, especially when we look at the Caribbean, small island developing states, when we listen to the contribution of our sister from St. Vincent, the fact that we may be leaving out vulnerable groups and marginalizing groups which were not vulnerable before, but may be very vulnerable as we move into that digital transformation process. And I mentioned earlier, we're opening a floodgate. Okay, that some of us are not really prepared to negotiate right now. So my contribution at this point is that we need opportunities to revisit the models of digital transformation that support e-governance and find entry points that are contextual and that are cognizant of where the different societies' economies are coming from. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Like I said, we'll do one brief session or sub-session, let's say, on connectivity. So thank you so much for all of your interventions on e-governance. Thank you, Carlos. We will swap out our speaker very briefly to our project expert from GIZ, who assisted us with his felicitation of the dialogue on connectivity. Leonel Tapia, if you could briefly share, please, do it in a very brief manner, your observations on the topic of connectivity in the Caribbean, and then we can hear your interventions. Thank you.
Very sorry, I'm sure you want to do something else. But okay, let's see. Well, good afternoon. Thank you for staying late and waiting for the cocktail. I know that it's hard, but basically we just want to have this exchange to know the priority for the Caribbean country, to touch base, to say. So far in Latin America, not including the Caribbean country, we have identified 4 working areas. It's regulation, market regulation, and 5G implementation. That's one of them. The second one is gender divide. It's important for all this country. Rural connectivity is something that came out this afternoon too. And digital health, particularly in Costa Rica and South America. And so far, what I heard in this last 2 days for the Caribbean is just very draft idea that I have here, nothing to write about, but just to keep the idea in our agenda. It's first thing that appeared to me is the closing the digital divide with significant connectivity mechanisms. It seems that something is consensus. Regulation and preparation of the radio spectrum for telecommunication. Capacity building in ICT education. In that respect, GIC can support this. We have a lot of other programs that can do something really relevant for the area. And it seemed to me that the promotion of public and private partnerships is relevant for the connectivities. The resources are significant. The state, the government do not have it. You have to work with the private sector. In addition, it seemed to me that the effort to reduce the cost of internet connectivity is something that is applicable it might be applicable for the Caribbean country too. The idea of last mile connectivity, the role of the government, the role of the market, and also something that is, it came this afternoon too, but I had to have a resilient digital infrastructure that provides for disaster recovery and response. That's something that is very, it seemed to me that is a priority for the area, and a resilient system for climate change. I mean, we should go together in this twin transition, climate change and digital transformation. I think in the Caribbean it applies completely. And finally, it's just my impression, I might be wrong, please. It seemed to me the connectivity challenges that the Caribbean countries are facing are very significant, and they require important resources. So we need to work together with, with the Development Bank, with BELA, how we put resources together to find a good solution that apply to all the country. This is something that I have, and of course I'm willing to have follow-up meeting and to find activity that makes sense for the region particularly, and to see how they apply for particular country. That's, thank you.
Thank you so much, Leonel, and thank you also for the mention of Bella. Obviously, our colleague Luis from the Digital Alliance from Red Clara is also there, and I'm sure also open to discuss any more specific topics regarding Bella. Are there interventions about the topic of connectivity? I see a card up with Belize, but I think it's from, is it from before, or is it a new intervention? Okay, from before.
He doesn't remember.
Then opening the floor for other interventions on what was just been mentioned on connectivity, or also any other final thoughts that you might want to share before we close this roundtable on the EU-LAC Digital Alliance and the Caribbean. Yes, Trinidad and Tobago, please. We can't hear you, sorry.
It can't be that we have nothing to say on connectivity. So I think the moderator, in fact, covered issues that would, of course, be very relevant for the Caribbean. But in terms of, I'm just thinking, because our region is so susceptible to natural disasters, there has to be some process by which we have a way of protecting the data and ensuring business continuity. One of the issues that we had suggested to some other colleagues within the region was even setting up some form of a data embassy model, whereby the region could in fact establish a sort of, I'm using the word ecosystem again, of data centers, because our governments have in fact made significant investment in either establishing data centers or securing data center services. So leveraging that investment, maybe having a couple data centers within the region, and this is the Caribbean region, where the data could be stored. It would address as well the issue of data sovereignty. So our data isn't being stored somewhere, I don't know, in Asia, as opposed to being stored in the region. And therefore, in the event of a disaster impacting one country, there is still access to ensure that services could still be delivered to citizens, even though you may not be able to do it within country because infrastructure is damaged. So we've been thinking along those lines and just wondering how could that then actually be operationalized. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that intervention and bringing that important point back up. Are there any further, let's say, closing comments or comments on connectivity? I will give it 10 more seconds in case anyone wants to raise their card. And otherwise, I would pass it back to Felix for the conclusions before we go to the cocktail. Yeah, Belize, please, go ahead.
One comment, I promise, one comment. I know we're discussing connectivity very broadly. I would just recommend that for the future, and maybe we can consider a working session where we also get to invite the regulators, because we're not all regulators sitting at this table having a discussion on connectivity and coverage, etc. And I think it's important that the regulators also have the ability to give their viewpoints on this specific topic.
Yes, very important point. Thank you so much. All right, then Felix, please, if you could share with us your concluding thoughts on this session.
Let's see. I can't drink alcohol today, so I'm not eager to go to the cocktails. So you're going to have to bear with me. Well, thanks a lot, first of all, for all of you coming together. We thought, precisely as I introduced, that having a specific focused on Caribbean would be interesting and useful. I think that you have all understood and realized that the 5 topics we've addressed in these 2 days, now we can say 2 days, are the crux of the matter of, let's say, the foundations of a digital society. Then we can talk about content, but you wouldn't even go to bed, forget the cocktails. What I really think, and that's what we all hear, I think you also heard Colombia, but we have the different member states with their implementing agencies, different capacities we have, EU regulations. If you look at the list of homework that is piling on your side for the foundations of a proper digital society that does not also become the weak link of a chain, it's obvious that if the European Union could do it, I don't see a good reason why the Caribbean could not do it. And also because I think in your case it's even more urgent, because there's no case at all for the business, for the private sector, for the banks, the international banks, for the international community, donors, political partners, whatever you want to call, to build each and every aspect of all this stuff in each and every one of your countries. You cannot have, I mean, it's not that you cannot have it, of course you can have it, but you need to be able to find the resources, because as many of you say, you and us are literally very, very much aware of, we do a project, the project works, we leave, the funding leaves, and the project falls. And we are, I think, I'm not sure we're fed up, but I see you're fed up, so probably we are too. So there is a moment in which I would really ask from the European Union if we could have a more, let's say, a wider Caribbean conversation, or a wider conversation with the Caribbean, or a Caribbean conversation on the wide, no. If we could have a conversation where maybe you would, instead of trying to do an individual country strategy to get a cyber agency, to get a data protection agency, to have a 5G auction, we had it today at lunch, to link up to the Bella cable. There's no way the European Commission and the European Union have no intention of having the Bella cable run through the Caribbean and not stop. But it cannot be that in order to do that, Luis, who is here, Luis, his last name is Bella already. Nobody knows what else he does. There's no way we can make it happen if we need to go Bella shopping in each and every one of your countries. And we have to look for the funding, and we have to look for the appropriate networks. It's not going to work. We all have too much work. We are lovely people, dedicated enthusiasts, but we have too much work. And believe me, if you can get access to the Bella cable, you're going to get access to the big jackpot. In terms of what Caribbean needs for its digital development, that thing, which is ridiculously small, will change. I think it's going to change a lot of things. We were able to do it better. So my proposal is not very wise. It's not even technically savvy. Is if we cannot repeat this discussion in each country. Can someone, I don't know who it is in the Caribbean, I will go to the Caribbean in January. Can someone organize a meeting with the digital ministries, the regulators, the different regional Caribbean groupings? And we are very happy on this side of the table to not do island shopping, because the European Governance Academy, GIZ, FIAP, we are all here. We have the money, we have the data, the knowledge, we can help you out. We can even, you even need to come into this Latin American and Caribbean and Digital Alliance and benefit from the work. I think you said it in the OECS, benefit from the work that Latin Americans are doing themselves. Because you're probably going to learn more from them that you're going to learn from us, because we are far away. But we have a set of tools that maybe may allow you to get quickly, because that's also the advantage of being small. You're not a 51 million people country like Colombia. So also being smaller, if you can be flexible, has an advantage. So we would be very happy to promote that conversation if we could have I don't think you need an artificial intelligence strategy and a cybersecurity strategy and a data protection strategy and then one regulation on top of the other. Maybe what you need is to have a Caribbean framework, voluntary for those of you who want to join, and the rest who want to stay separate, good luck, but it's a sovereign decision. Data sovereignty is what you learn when you give your data to the restaurant, and then you discover that it's located in Alaska or somewhere. So that's what I would propose, because we can all do this. We can do it again in December, we can do it in January, we have all kinds of tools. The idea of the Caribbean toolbox, I thought was a very neat one, but we need to have one. Because otherwise you're going to have all of us touring around, throwing around good ideas, patchwork ideas, and you're going to continue complaining because probably you're right in complaining. So I wonder if we could think about that, and I would be happy for some of the Latin Americans from the mainland, if that is a concept, to bring on, to come in. Sorry, Lina, it's a concept, mainland, islands, We also have islands. When you speak about tropicalizing, I think about the Canary Islands. I'm saying, I don't know what I'm going to tell them, but if you want to tropicalize data protection, go to Tenerife. Yeah, that would be my conclusion. I'm happy to use January or even VTCing ourselves. We have delegations here from in Barbados. I'm talking to Trinidad and Tobago delegation. So, I'm happy to do that if this is what you wish. But I think it makes no sense for us to go to St. Lucia and then to St. Kitts and then to Antigua and then to Trinidad and then to Jamaica and then to Bahamas and say, I have a data protection, whatever it is I have for you. And then I have a cybersecurity. And then I come with an Estonian on a governance academy. And, I just don't think it doesn't make sense. I'm sorry if I'm being blunt, but since you're all going into cocktails, you're probably going to forget it. And if that's okay with you, I will come back tomorrow with some more on this Caribbean issue, speak to some of you. I'm taker of all kinds of good ideas that you may have, but I just don't think on a thing like digital, where you all see the truck coming your way very fast, I don't see a better idea. Sorry to be a bit outspoken at this time of the day, but hopefully we're going to have some great cocktails. And Yeah. Well, I'm sure that it can be even better. So thanks a lot. Thanks for this good day. I always regret coming to Cartagena and being squeezed in these four walls. But now you're going to go to the warmer part. And thanks a lot for being so open and so collaborative today. I think we've done a great work today. And we're looking forward for tomorrow, some of the stuff we have left. And I will be presenting a summary of what we have been concluding in each session. So what is the way forward? We have some volunteers, and that's the way in which we will kick this forward, trying to go to 2025. So thanks a lot. Enjoy the cocktails.